All right, so officially welcome. Good afternoon. Welcome to everyone who is here. We have a couple of hundreds of participants online through different channels that are joining us, and we have the audience here with us. So officially welcome to this session, the specialized series of ReTech Center. This one is on Fashion 5.0, and I have the pleasure and the honor of hosting icons, key players from the industry, and those who have been working in the fashion industry for decades and who are experts in the fields that we are going to discuss today. But before we start the conversation, I would need to introduce ReTech Center to you all and the business school, so you know who is hosting you, right? So we are École des Ponts Business School, the business school of École Nationale des Ponts et Chaussées, an engineering school which is running for about 300 years, one of the oldest engineering schools in the world that's still running. And we are the business school of École Nationale des Ponts et Chaussées, ENPC. We are focused on executive education. So while ENPC trains engineers for society, we train managers for the society. So that's the idea of École des Ponts Business School. We have programs in executive MBA, executive DBA. Our participants are coming from around the world, and only executive programs. So ReTech Center is a center for responsible technology, and the idea is to bring together the elements of the responsible transition with technology and digital innovation together, and to enhance today and enable the emerging desirable futures. So ReTech Center is hosted at École des Ponts Business School, École des Ponts Business School of École Nationale des Ponts et Chaussées, which is also a member of IPP, Institut Polytechnique de Paris. So what do we do? ReTech Center, in terms of a personal story, if you like. ReTech Center was a passion project, as you all know, as I have shared with all of you. Was a personal passion project for me that today has turned into a passion story for us, for the school, for our partners, for all of those who are following us, who are working with us, who are contributing to the work that we are doing from around the world in different industries and sectors. So from like an entrepreneurial project started, now today it contributes drastically to the evolution of the industry and reshaping the educational system in order to make it more relevant to conversations that we're going to have today. So the emerging futures of businesses, markets, and societies are shaping at the intersection of two major forces. One is the digital transformation, and the other one is the responsible transition. We know digital transformation and technology, how they have been reshaping the way that we live, we work, we communicate, we exchange, but we are less familiar with how the responsible transition is reshaping our industries and sectors. But in reality, these two forces are coming together, and they are making new emerging frontiers, if you like. They shape new frontiers for industries and societies. Industry 5.0 is happening where digital transformation encounters the responsible transition, where AI and blockchain and quantum and digital twins and all of these technologies, they come together and they enable and drive the responsible transition, the circular transition, SDGs, United Nations SDGs, ESG, creation of shared value, and many other elements of the responsible transition. That's where we have the Industry 5.0. So I have created a risk and readiness matrix for these emerging futures, all the aspects, all the critical pillars that are defining the success and failure of sectors, geographies, and industries, from strategy and competitiveness to resilience, risk, competitiveness, readiness, ecosystem design, operational design, economic modeling, business models, and everything else. So these are everything that is going to change. These are all the pillars that are going to define success and failure of industries and sectors toward Industry 5.0. Where we will need to push for and we will need to integrate the elements of the responsible transition for the well-being of the planet and its inhabitants. So now, what we do at ReTech Center is that we have 4 labs, the RISE labs. R for research, I for innovation, S for skills, and E for engagement. And these are everything that we do at ReTech Center. And at each lab, we have different type of initiatives that we are working on different topics and in different disciplines in order to advance the transition to a more responsible industrial revolution, which is Industry 5.0. So we have 30 specializations at ReTech Center, from smart cities, from agriculture, from finance, from risk and business intelligence, from foresight, to design, to wellness and health and everything else. One of them is fashion, and fashion is one of the most important ones. Is the first one that we are launching, actually, the programs today, and we are going to announce what we have been preparing with our network of partners and contributors that we have in the network. So then, talking about the evolution of the fashion industry toward Industry 5.0, what does it mean? What do we mean by that? The emerging desirable of digitally empowered responsible fashion is also at the intersection of digital transformation and the responsible transition. So here we would like to understand what are the implications for managers, for executives, for investors, for innovators, for policymakers, for decision makers. What is it at stake? What are the opportunities and risks? What is it that we need to know about? How technology can enable and drive the responsible transition. How artificial intelligence and robotics with quantum computing and digital twins and blockchain and Web3, among others, how can then support us for the responsible transition of the fashion industry? So this is what we are focused on. Today, the conversation is about this. Exactly the same critical pillars of success and failure, the risk and readiness matrix of the emerging futures in the fashion industry. We are looking at this. So we have the ReTech Fashion 5.0 RISE labs, in which we have the research lab, which is ReTech Publications, dedicated for Fashion 5.0, which means the responsible reincarnation of the fashion industry. We have the skills lab with the certifications and degree programs for upskilling and reskilling of the executives and decision makers and innovators and investors on the most important elements and topics of fashion. Innovation lab, which drives innovation, incubation, acceleration, fundraising, and investment in the fashion industry, and the engagement lab to bridge theory and practice, to bring industry and institutions, and to engage the public and private sector in implementation of the solutions that we are developing with the network of partners. So Fashion 5.0 is the focus of today's conversation, of the program that we are launching today as well, that we are going to share with you. So for today, we are honored to have Camera Nazionale della Moda Italiana, Mr. Carlo Capazza, the president of the Camera, who's with us here. We have Milano Fashion Institute, who is represented by the Dean of MFI, Professor Simone Cipriani as well. And of course, we have a Fédération de la Haute Couture et de la Mode, represented by Professor Pascal Morand, who is the executive president. And one of the partners, Women in Tech, you know very well Ayumi and the great work that she's leading, and École des Ponts Business School, delivered by ReTech Center. So at this point, I would like to invite Simone to shed some light on why do we have this, what is the story. I shared my story, Simone, the personal story I shared with everyone, so now it's your turn to share the personal story and then say, what is this about, why are we here, and what are we going to talk about? Thank you.
So I will be the light shedder. We heard you, the promise of Industry 5.0 is to get this technology, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, robotics, biotechnologies, and so on, to help us to address the real challenges of the world of today. We know that these challenges are relevant also for the fashion industry. The protection of natural capital, the regeneration of its own biodiversity, our capacity to have the same proactive approach of regeneration also in reducing emission and decarbonization, to go beyond net zero, to become climate positive, to address overproduction, another big issue, and to set set the stage for circularity, and at the same time, last but not least, protecting, enhancing, enforcing human and labor rights in all our supply chains. All these things are relevant for this industry. All these things can benefit of Industry 5.0, a clever and intelligent use of technology. But all these things create a huge area of complexity. They are complex matters. They are not simple. And these complex matters require governance, require appropriate systems of governance in the industry. Artificial intelligence is surely useful to carry out due diligence, risk assessment, to manage risks, to plan our work. But we can see the impact of Industry 5.0 in the value chain of this industry. We start from materials, biogeneration of materials, regenerative practices applied to that. And then we have product development. We have physical and digital garments, which are not only the garments for the avatars on the metaverse, which is already good, but which are also a system to create prototypes without producing them, and therefore not shortening, but reducing waste in the product development stage. And this is connected to consumers, to the fact that we can engage consumers through artificial intelligence in a meaningful way, not only to understand their sentiment, but also towards customization, personalization, and all these kind of activities. This sets the stage to address the problem of overproduction. This makes a circular approach, a closed loop approach possible. But then there is the big issue of production, where we will really test this Industry 5.0. To keep its promise, it has to help us to create a sort of symbiosis between technology and human beings, a collaborative environment in which machine help people to flourish also in production. I see a bag. I've been in supply chains for a long while in my life. I see a bag. I see a real bag, you know, a bag of one of the brands that work with Pascal and with Carlo. And I see those materials, some materials bioproduced. Then I see a system operated by artificial intelligence to spot defects, to help cutting, and then robotics to do the cutting. This already exists. But then I see stitching. When I have prepared the material and I have cut it, I see the stitching. The stitching is robotic, but it's also human. And here there is the creativity of fashion, to create products that enable us to have meaningful human hands in that stage, which is the labor-intensive stage, which is the stage in which we create meaning for consumers. This is what we said. You said, share your story. I was a UN officer, and I used to work in many countries in Africa and a bit in Afghanistan, also managing a supply chain for the brands. Susie knows it very well, because when we were nobody, when nobody wanted to work with us, we invited her, and she came and she wrote about us. And from that exact moment, we took off. I remember, you know, I'm the only one who has spent one evening with Mrs. Susie Menkes in person on top of the Ngong Hills in a community eating pizza baked by some boys for us. The pizza was horrible, but Susie was so kind to say that it was good, and she ate it also. She told us a white lie. It was a terrible pizza. But what do I mean? That working in Africa, and in Afghanistan and so on, we try to adopt this idea of using technology in a meaningful way. We use technology in this market to create an ecosystem for people to flourish and for society and for the planet to flourish. This is the real discussion on Industry 5.0, and I will conclude this introduction with the words of two Nobel laureates, Daron Acemoglu and Simon Johnson. Power and Progress, you may have heard about their book. The point is, the impact of technology depends on the choices we make about its use. And the more people, the more stakeholders we involve in these choices, the more technology is beneficial to society and to the planet. The less people we involve, the less stakeholders we involve, the more dangerous, the less beneficial it is. So we need to debate about Industry 5.0. We need to speak about these technologies. We need to speak about where we want to go. And we start today. We start today to have this conversation with Susie Menkes, a doyen of fashion journalist and the goddess of the ethical fashion initiative I created in the United Nations. It thrived thanks to you, Susie, full stop. And then after you, Vivienne Westwood came. And our market dimension started. And then on my right, I have Pascal Morand, an academic. He belongs to here, a professor. There are people who have studied with you here inside. The executive president de la Fédération de la Haute Couture et de la Mode, so you understand what it is. And now I disclose another secret, and an artist, a musician. And then on his right, I have Carlo Capasa. Carlo is a person who's been in the industry from all of his life, since when you were born. You were born with the DNA. When they took blood to you the first time, there was some stitching and something in it. You are the president of the Italian Fashion Council, Camera della Moda, but you are also the president of the Milano Fashion Institute, MFI, the business school of Camera della Moda, of which I am a dean. And then down there is Professor Saman Sarbatsvatan, who once met me in a conference of The Economist and said, shut up saying stupid things, you come to ReTech, you study for a DBA, and you learn something that is really useful so we can add value to your experience, otherwise you speak rubbish everywhere. And I did it, and that's why I am here. So I have a question. I have a round of applause, although a lot of people are online, but they cannot applaud, but we hear their happiness in having a conversation with you. I have some 4 problems that I mentioned, which I would like to address with a set of questions to each of these people on the panel. The first problem is a fundamental problem. As we said, fashion is an industry where human creativity has always been central. We must be sure that robotics and artificial intelligence complement human innovation instead of replacing it. So I ask first to Carlo Capasa, how are your member brands integrating artificial intelligence and automation while preserving craftsmanship? We spoke about craftsmanship a short while ago.
Good afternoon, everyone. Very happy to be here. This guy who is at the center interviewing all of us is not has a lot of titles, but he's also a showman, as you can see. And so very happy to be here with those incredible people and with you. Well, actually, the challenge of fashion for the future is how to put together artificial intelligence, for example, and craftsmanship. How to put together creativity and artificial intelligence in a company that is creativity driven, because those are the companies we are talking about. When we talk about Camera della Moda, the association I represent, we have 250 brands, Italian brands, that are all creative brands. And I think that Pascal is in a similar position to mine in France. So how to address all these new technology, artificial intelligence with the future without forgetting the past, the roots. This is a big challenge. First of all, as Europeans, we tend to put a lot of rules. And so even in artificial intelligence, we've been putting a lot of rules. Americans say no rules. Well, I think there is something in the middle, because no rules is quite dangerous when we talk about new technology. And a lot of rules, sometimes they stop the technology from working properly. At the moment, there is a lot of work done to make the artisan more related to the future, more digitalization, more use of artificial intelligence to think how we could shape the artisan of the future. But all these, remember that at the end, the difference is by the hand of those people. We cannot think so. Artificial intelligence could be in the project, in the program, in the idea in general, but then you need the human, we call the artisanal intelligence to be together with artificial intelligence. So it's two different intelligence, they have to meet each other. What is happening today in fashion is that there is a lot of use of the artificial intelligence, for example, for prediction of sales, in order to save the stocks. You know, there is we want to have less stocks, we want to be more sustainable. The first problem we have, all fashion houses, creative and not, is the stocks. Is a huge stocks. And where do they go, those stocks? What do we do with that? Artificial intelligence could be a great use and help for managing the production and the prediction of proper production in order to minimize stocks. And this is one of the best use, I think. When you look at the creative side, okay, there is also there is something where could be very useful, but we have to remember that at the end there is a lot of problem for copyright, and so we can use it in a very limited way, and it is proper to use it in a very limited way, more for researching, more for general activities. But at the end, we need the designers, because we cannot forget that we have a creative industry. So the artificial intelligence could be at the service of creativity and not opposite. And we have to be very clear. And here we need the rules, the European rules, that they say when something is created from a human being or not. And we appreciate that human beings stay at the center of our creation. So this just to give you a few samples, but as you said, we can use artificial intelligence everywhere. Important is we do with some respect for the people, respect of what we represent, respect of creativity.
A human-centric view of it. Pascal, what's your take from the point of view of the French fashion system?
Well, I think it's a pleasure to be here with you all, and thank you, Simone. And as Carlos said, we are in a very similar situation in the case of industries and companies and brands and houses, which are basically creativity driven. So if we talk about AI, and as Carlo mentioned, we have to differentiate, of course, predictive AI and generative AI. And if we talk about predictive AI, it's clearly absolutely supporting. And you were talking, Simone, about the supply chain organization. There are big moves, and predictive AI has already enabled to make a huge, important number of progresses. But of course, it must be integrated into the global information system. And that's absolutely key, and there will be very transformation. And then it leads us to other topics, more or less technical, like interoperability, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's one thing. And concerning generative AI, the question is how to remain human-centric, and how is going also not only to create, and who is going to create, and who is going to embody this creativity. And what we know is that generative AI has already started doing amazing things. But there are several factors. One factor is that it goes through the recognition and the learning of many facts and forms and shapes and so on, by definition. But at the same time, you cannot enter fully into the consciousness and the balance between the mind and the body of people by itself. So it pushes the limit of where to go in terms of bringing emotional value and creativity, but it must be appropriated to be supportive and to be helpful, and that is absolutely fundamental. And there's one thing also that we have to take care of if we talk about creativity driven, which, you know, we cannot say some brands are creativity driven and other brands are consumer driven, because of course the between both dimension, it can be sometimes a little bit uncertain, but for sure the brands that we represent are creativity driven. And I have in mind a line by not by Michael Porter, but by Peter Drucker, saying that who is a great professor and reference strategy, and saying this characteristic of the knowledge economy, meaning that what is not measured does not exist. And that is the problem, because creativity cannot be measured in the same way. I've also in head, comes to my mind, a word by the great writer Milan Kundera, saying that the good thing with poetry is that poetry can say one thing and the contrary of that thing. And what matters is not a truth in terms, it's just an emotion, it's a style. This is true in fashion, this is true in art, this is true in literature. And AI can reproduce a certain style, but then of course, the human-centric intelligence is moving ahead because new things are happening, new memories are coming, etc., etc. So, but we have to take care not to be, let's say, because we believe and we know that creativity is fundamental, it's part of our humanistic culture, that it is not like sort of threatened by the strictly knowledge. I say that as an economist, but knowledge economy in society in which everything is measured. Susie has a huge expertise and knowledge in creativity, but I'm not sure that if we would ask Susie to rank the level of creativity by branch, she would be very happy. She would tell me, Pascal, what are you asking me? This doesn't make any sense, I'm sure. So, and the other thing I want to say concerning robotics, which is that it has to be understood, I've said that also in other circumstances, that the fashion manufacturing industry is probably the most technically and technologically complex industry, because robotics supported by AI, but let's say a global IT system, can work easily each time you use, it reproduces the movement of the arm. This is one thing. And then you have also for that, beside other technology like 3D printing and et cetera, et cetera. But this is one thing. So to build up a plane, you can use robotics in most of the industries. But as soon as you have to reproduce the movement of the fingers, it becomes much more complicated. And then it works. This is one high level of complexity. And I know that there has been some experiences, in particular in Hangzhou, in China, but with quite simple clothes. But when it's very complex, when there is a lot of craftsmanship, it is technically extremely complex in terms of robotics technology to reproduce, and we are very far from getting that. And if you add the movement of the fingers on soft materials, then it's another grade of complexity. So this is another thing, and it shows also why creativity alongside craftsmanship are extremely modern. It's not traditional art and craft. It is extremely contemporary. And the ultimate thing is that it enables to balance with the fact that we live in a digital society and economy. So we need to have the sensory balance with that. And I think this is why also creativity driven, under the condition we do appropriate, which what we do, we work a lot that with each other, and the brands and the houses appropriate of that technology, can be even stronger in the digital economy and in the digital society and knowledge economy.
Thank you for this meaningful reply, Pascal. So creativity as a feature of our contemporary, of our world, of our age. Susie, I have a question for you. And the question is the following. From your perspective, what are the most promising and concerning trends in AI-driven fashion? What have you seen in regards to this in the recent Milano and Paris Fashion Week? Have you seen something you want to share with us?
Talking to the wrong person. I am fascinated by
Stronger.
the work of human hands. Is this coming out? I'm fascinated by human hands. That's what I love. I love going to India and seeing people sewing and making things, each one the same, but each different in its way. I don't mean it's the only thing I want to see, but I don't think that you can imagine a life. I don't want to imagine a life that has only things that are done through AI or whatever. But the thing has to be balanced out. And that's what I hope can continue to be done. Of course, in India, in Africa also, you get some wonderful work. And it's also so interesting in these countries that haven't yet come under the way that most people dress themselves now throughout Europe and many other countries. So there's an individuality in the way they imagine themselves and also the colors they choose and everything else. But of course, there's the other side of things. You can't imagine that the whole world is going to go back to the idea of everything made by the hand. But I am concerned at the speed with which designers, young designers especially, are now encouraged, demanded to produce new clothes for each season, each moment, each day. Of course, it's an exciting thing to be able to do that. And in some ways, I can imagine that, not having been brought up to it, but I would also find, having always loved making my own clothes as a young woman, I can imagine how fascinating it is now that everything is so much more sophisticated and it's completely different from handwork as I saw it in that time, and it as is being born in the countries that I like, India, that I talked about just now. But my question always with these things is, how do you get the balance right? How do you stop people in fashion, people who are joining fashion perhaps, how do you stop them rushing through and enable them to go slightly slower, think about what they want to do, try and work out how they can express what they believe in and what they love without rushing in at the speed, which is really rather wonderful, the speed with which you can make something now, impossible to imagine for somebody when I was a child. But speed is not everything. And I have a lot of times when I actually see the work of people, I have the urge to say, slow down, think about it, spend a whole week working on this. But I mean, of course, I don't say that. I say, that's wonderful, that's exciting, terrific. How long did it take you? And they're terribly proud and say, 2 hours or maybe a bit less. And I think, oh, but that's it. Speed, you can't go back to slow. But maybe you shouldn't go on to speed. You need to get some sort of balance in between. But I'd like to hear somebody else who's not of my advanced generation and tell me how they feel about it. Because, I can imagine, in a way, the world is changing so much that different people, not just different people, but people of different ages, I think, feel quite differently. And that's something that certainly should be followed and discovered, particularly as it's a necessity. I mean, the older ages are used to talk because of their experience and to speak and to teach. And that's a very good thing. But at the same time, we've all got to get together so that we can get a perfect result from those who want to look only at the future and those who are dragging on, like me, to the past.
Thank you. So beautiful. We need an applause. So beautiful. Thank you, Susie. We wanted you here exactly because of what you said. I give the floor now to Professor Sarbat Saman with the question to the academic. How do ReTech Center initiatives promote human centricity? The human centricity, as Susie has mentioned, Pascal and Carlo have mentioned, this human centricity in the age of AI and robotics. We heard Susie, I would say, a humanistic voice. We want to hear the voice of science now. Over to you, Saman.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for everything that you shared. I absolutely agree. And those are the things that we need to really cherish, like slow fashion, taking the time to appreciate, and not always putting everything on, for the speed and everything else, but really focus on the experience and the quality rather than the speed. So at ReTech Center, exactly what we do is that, first of all, we create the environment to have these type of conversations, to start these conversations, bridging industry and academia and the public and private sector. But then not only that, because then we actually move, we take critical steps forward. What we do with research, with innovation, with the labs that we have, the RISE labs, advancing research in order to make sure that technology remains as an enhancer for human capacity and human creativity, not replacing human creativity. That's not something that we want. We want technology to be there as an enabler, an enhancer of human creativity. And that's exactly what we need to do. We need to teach the younger generations to the older generations. We need to make sure that decision makers and executives who are integrating and using these technologies, they understand what they're expected to do with technology. Technology can do many cool things, but not all of them are cool things. If we replace human by using technology, we are not really respecting the value of technology as an enabling tool. Philosophically speaking, technology is a purpose, is a tool to fulfill purposes, is a purpose-driven set of tools that we use. So that's exactly what we do at ReTech Center, making sure that people understand how to integrate technology by promoting human creativity and human values, which very well structured within the concept of Industry 5.0.
Indeed, and so you see the richness of this discussion, all these points of view together. Before passing to the second set of questions, I want to tell you that at the end of all the questions, there will be somebody to wrap up, somebody who is taking notes about what we say and who will put them together for conclusions. And this somebody is a person in Geneva who is online. Her name is Paola Deda. She's director at the UN, at the Economic Commission for Europe. She's in charge of biodiversity, forests, and she's the chair of the UN Alliance for Sustainable Fashion, the alliance of all the agencies of the UN that in a way or another deal with sustainability and fashion. Paola cannot appear because she's recovering from a surgery, but she's online. Paola, say hello to everybody.
Hello to everybody. I'm really, really happy to be here with you. And indeed, you don't see me, but you guess that I'm really taking notes. So I'm happy at the end to try to provide a sort of summary, maybe with more questions open. But I can tell you that observing from here, the discussions are extremely interesting. And really happy to meet all of you, including Susie. I am definitely a fan, so great also to have her voice in this discussion is really appreciated.
And next time you will be here in person.
Definitely. That's a promise.
Definitely. So we go to a second problem. Digital product passports, blockchain, all these tools are gaining traction. They may be game changers for transparency, circularity. The big issue is really transparency and circularity. I see Martina up there, who is an expert of these things and who came from Italy to attend this conference. Thank you. So my first question this time is to Susie Menkes. I start by you. How is media shaping consumer awareness and demand for the circular transition of the fashion industry? Do you see a role in media in this to promote transparency, to promote circularity? Do you see that?
It's so complicated now to divide who we're talking about when we're talking about the media. Who are these people? They're not, as it was, nicely in a newspaper, writing some little article that probably many fewer people see than, as I have discovered now that I do so much online, that you're likely to have at least 5 times more, probably 10 times more than when you've got the printed, no longer printed, but the written word, as you might say. So I think it's very complicated to make the statement of what is what. But it's certainly something to do with, it's attached entirely to the age situation, in that those who naturally now write to themselves, to other people. It's not writing, but it's making sure that you can get to the person you want or offer something that you want to sell or to do or to buy, that it flows really easily for a generation. I would say, and the people here can argue with me, I would say that anybody under the age of about, I think only about 42 would probably be the cutting off period, when you've got people who are not struggling, but working hard to keep up with it all. You go up much higher towards ancient people like me, and it is, you get used to it, but it takes much longer. But I think that what is interesting is that this won't last. This is true now. It's a generational thing now, that you've got people in the entire world in different levels and different ages and stages. But this will not be true in 50 years' time. Then it will be completely normal, although maybe something new, probably something new will have been discovered. But I think it's a difficult time to announce this, that, and the other with exact figures, because they will be changing. They will be changing probably in the next 3 months. And I think we should all be aware of that and not imagine that it's just a question of stepping up and getting on with it, and then you can join the others. You have to be prepared not just to join what other people are doing and thinking, but to develop yourself in order that you can do it.
Wow. So you mean that's a positive piece of news, though? You mean that my daughters, when they are my age, they will be digitally conversant and be very fine with this kind of technology, whatever it will be?
I think I can safely say that your daughters are miles ahead of you, as my
they are very
children
much ahead of me.
Exactly.
There's no doubt about that. Pascal, I have a question for you. Are luxury and fashion brands embracing regenerative models, or is circularity still a niche movement? What's your point of view?
Well, no, the brands are, I don't think I have a bias in saying that. I will say a few words about the DPP too. But the brands have moved quite quickly in the last years.
Yeah.
You know, during a long time, brands and houses thought, and they were not wrong, that creativity and craftsmanship by itself is an act of durability, and a non-physical durability, sometimes physical, but non-physical durability. But no, not only because of the regulations, they go much further in doing that. So concerning regenerative aspects in the strict sense, if you look at the LVMH or Kering, which has like a fund for that, and LVMH and many actions, and all the big ones are much involved at the central level or at the brand level. Sometimes it can appear that like mid-sized brands, let's say under like 20 million turnover, 50 or even 200, that they don't do, but they don't necessarily communicate on that.
Okay.
But the fact of not communicating doesn't mean they are not extremely active working in new business model. And we could give numerous examples. So that is so many things are happening, and for the young designer either. But then the question we may get back to that. I said the young designers either is that once again how to measure that, because you have many qualitative like insights, many qualitative development, but how do you do to measure that?
Yes.
And that is the point, and maybe we get back to that afterwards. I have one thing maybe to just to two things to add. Maybe I said one. I gave the example of dead stocks. Young designers work on dead stocks.
Yes.
Quite often they try to reuse. We're in the reuse and regenerative, in that sense, economy. But that's one thing to do. But once you have said that, how is it integrated in a measurement aspect and dynamic? What I wanted to say about the DPP is following. DPP looks nice because the digital product passport, who cannot agree with the digital product passport, and it is right and great to see that it is absolutely essential in the European regulation to be settled, to be accomplished very concretely and technically in the ESPR framework. But once we say that, it raises many technical questions, because we are supposed to know what is a product. Okay, we know what is a product when we look at a product, but if we integrate all the components, how is it composed, where it has been produced, what is the definition in that with the style and color? Yes, for sure, but even sometimes the fact that it has been produced in another place can make a slight difference if it's not exactly strictly the same fabrics for such and such production, manufacturing, and so on. And then up to which level of depth you go, like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, you know? So the raw definition, the raw data of what is a product are technically complex. And then we have the transactional data, where it was produced, how was it transported, etc., etc. So that represents millions for a production, millions of data. And then once you have that, let's suppose that you can trade that and that you decide to go to a certain level, tier 2, I don't know, you do that, fine. Then you have to set up the KPI, because you are not going to reproduce the million data on the information on the passport. So you need to choose that, and you need to represent that. So what looks simple is in fact extremely technically stimulating and complex. So we need to work a lot to define things, and even on such questions such as what means and what is a product, which looks like a absurd metaphysical question, but in fact, which is a very concrete question for any stakeholder in any house working on the supply chain and much beyond.
Wow, thank you, Pascal. It's really, you gave us a first real hint of the complexity of this industry. This industry is about managing complexity, really, it's that. Carlo, what's your point of view on this topic from the point of view of Italy? Because in Italy, you have practically you have the supply chain of this industry, of the top fashion industry, of the luxury industry there. So you have a view also along the supply chain. What's your take on this?
We have a view, and we face a lot of problems. Sometimes it's happened that people, they talk about what's up in T3, as Pascal saying, T4, T2, T3 is very complex and difficult. What Pascal says is true, is absolutely difficult. We are thinking to the problem. Go back, even back. Today there is a regenerative agriculture, for example. Some brands that are working to produce cotton or silk again in Italy. Why? Because even when you go back to the product, you have the problem that normally we don't produce anymore in Europe the raw material like silk or cotton or wool or cashmere. So we buy that material. And what's happened before? How was treated? How was the consumer water? How did the people interfere with the production of the raw materials? So we have another world there. That's why people are trying now to think to work on regenerative agriculture, to start to control even the production of the materials from the beginning, from the fiber, before the fiber. This is the point. And we lost all that in those years in Italy and in Europe. Most of the materials, silk and cotton, they're produced in China or around that area. And wool and cashmere, we still have a control, but they are produced, in Australia, in other countries anyway, So what's happened? What shall we do? We should do what Pascal said. We need to organize the data. We need, first of all, Once we were talking and making a project with the brand about ESG. And what was the concept of fashion ESG? Was exactly that, to say which are the data that they are really important. We have to give a priority to those data, and how much they weight those data, which is the weight we should give when we talk about an ESG program. Is this more important than that? In this complexity, we have to put one discipline on the judging the importance of that, giving a point, because at the end, how can we think that one consumer arrive to buy a garment and would like to know what's behind with this complexity? We have to make complexity more simple. That's the point. And it's easy to say, but difficult to make.
Wow.
But this is what we should do.
Again, management of complexity, trying to get hold of complexity and make it understandable.
And simple.
And simple. Both you underline that. Saman, may I come to you? You are the academic voice. What's the role of blockchain and Web3 in driving Fashion 5.0? Give us the point of view of technology and science.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. So for the conversations that we have, there is some good news, then there's better news. So before answering to the question about Web3 and blockchain, but the good news is that there's a lot of complexity. The good news is that we have a lot to work on. But the better news is that this represents and this translates into new job opportunities. This represents it into new opportunities for scientists, for innovators, for those who are coding or now using with no codes, creating applications and technological sort of advances to make this happen. So yes, it is complex. Yes, we have a lot of things to do. It's good that we know how complex they are going to be. At least the awareness is there. The regulations are there from the EU and the UN. The directives are there and showing us the way, the path forward. Guys, if you're in the industry of making, this is what you're going to be asked for. Get ready. So now we have that in the industry for at least 3 to 5 years for most of the directives that are coming from the EU or the UN regarding digital product passport, all type of audits that we need to do and all types of conformity that we need to do. So the good news is that we know them in advance, and the better news is that there are ways to make them work. We are going to make them happen. So the job market, be ready. Investors, investors are highly interested in these type of conversations. Investors are highly interested because they are finding niche opportunities technically to invest, because all of these are upcoming, they're all new, they are required. We need them. These are the demands that are not only coming from the market, it's not only coming from the producers, it's not only coming from the supply chain, it's coming from all across the stakeholders. It's coming from the regulatory bodies, coming from the end users, coming from the buyers, coming from the procurement, everywhere. So we need them. So job market, be ready. Investors, great news on the way. Well, there's tons of new initiatives that now you need to invest in as responsible investment strategies, right? Innovators, great news, opportunity to innovate, the need for innovate, the support from the public sector, the support from the financial flows, public and private. So investors, innovators are in a fantastic position. Scientists and digital people, technical people who are working, of course, we need them. Managers and executives who are not necessarily technical. They are not necessarily dealing with financial flows or conformity and regulatory aspects. They are at the center of this conversation, because this is the point that we need everyone to understand the language of technology. This is the point of time that technology is no more a dedicated topic of choice. It's not your choice to study technology or not anymore. I'm talking to the young ones also in the audience, those who are online as well. Technology used to be a discipline. When I was studying back before 2000, I chose to study technology, but it's not the case anymore. You have to study technology no matter what you're studying, right? So, which means that technology is now having a transversal role across industries and sectors. So now, what is our role? for innovators, for investors, for decision makers, for policymakers. We all need to understand at least one simple thing. What are these technologies and how can they help us achieve what we need to do? One of these technologies, as Simone asked, Web3 and blockchain. There's a lot of buzz around blockchain, cryptocurrency, great stuff. We don't talk about them now, though. Now we're talking about the core fundamental technology of blockchain and the Web3, which is an economy in which stakeholders are engaged. Stakeholders, they can contribute directly, and we can measure. We can measure and see what has been done, what has been contributed to the system. In simple words, blockchain and Web3, they bring trust. Trust in data, trust in processes, and trust in operations. Because one thing is of interest for everyone is that on blockchain, everything is there, transparently recorded, cannot be changed, timestamp, and everything else. Accountability is designed within the system of blockchain and Web3. So blockchain and Web3 for advancing the agenda of sustainability and circular economy is on the top, the list of the priorities of technologies. Blockchain and Web3 is one of them.
Thank you, Saman. You make me think that a few days ago we were in the MFI, in the Milano Fashion Institute, doing the programs for the future. And we did what you said. We put technology in every program, whatever program it is, communication, everything. Everything has a component of artificial intelligence and so on. And it's because it's simply needed. It's a matter of fact. You're absolutely right. I have now another fundamental problem I would like to address with our guests, and it's about governance. The big issue of governance. Are we ready? Are people in boards, are governance structures ready for this challenge, to take this responsibility? And I would like to start by Pascal this time. To what extent do you realize the need for a change in governance in connection with the new orientation of the EU regulations, the Omnibus Decree and all the rest? They are changing a bit the shape of the regulatory landscape of Europe on sustainability. We know that boards remain accountable on sustainability, accountable to the law. What's your point of view from the French Federation?
Well, first, as you mentioned the omnibus
Yes.
statement and directive, which is, of course, important to make it like a more, let's say, accessible, and to do so that the European houses are not like burdened in the global environment. I think, and what tells me my experience and our experience in the last years with the regulation and the global governance, is that there still is a problem, I can say, of language and sharing the language. Because it can happen that some stakeholders agree or disagree concerning concepts upon which they don't necessarily have the same perception. So this needs to be clear. Without common language, we cannot work with each other. We don't even just to agree or disagree. I can give an example, a classical example. There are many examples. One is the concept of durability. You know, when you ask durability, what means durability to an LCA specialist or any engineer, he or she will consider durability as resistance, resisting to crash tests, you know. And if you ask a designer, this will don't make any sense. It's a clause that will take care because it's a great, because you feel like taking care because of the emotional and the sensory value, and we can stay and last for a long time, including for generations, and that makes a big difference. But the first one is easier to measure than the second one, and that's it. And we get back to the point we mentioned. So usually, when the way it is analyzed in LCA methodology, it's just like if fashion is identical or will be identical to hard wearing, but fashion is not hard wearing. So we could take other examples. And it's very important just to put words, lacking words in the world, lacking words bring, let's say, chaos to the world, as we know, as some writers, many writers said. But so we need to have that. So I could go more into details on this governance and the different aspects. You know, Carlo and I, and the Camera and the Federation, we are both members of a European Fashion Alliance that we have created for creative fashion, which works with the other organizations of EXIA for luxury industry, ReTech, and many others, and to promote and to carry the voice of creative fashion. And it's very important, but let's say it's not more important. Beside that, the notion of the language, the technical language, what we talk about is very important, precisely to make this complexity simple. And then we get back to the values that we were describing, and which, in fine, are like fundamental humanistic values that creative fashion carries over and over.
The importance of language. I was in a working group with the Global Reporting Initiative a couple of weeks ago, working on the new reporting standard of fashion. It's exactly that, the importance of language, the importance of sharing the same meaning of language and meaning, because language confers meaning. Carlo, we also work together on these points when we work together, as you said before, on the ESG due diligence and all these things. I have a question for you. How are industry leaders in your world aligning governance with sustainability goals? And again, the European regulations and so on, but more really aligning governance and sustainability goals?
Well, there is a kind of a revolution in fashion, no? Started with this idea of sustainability. Now we don't know what's going on, because we see around the world that they think that sustainability is almost something we should not care about. But I think that we should care a lot, because I think it's anyway the future of our planet is still matter to me and to fashion people. And I also think that whatever we think in this precise moment, in a medium timing, we will understand that sustainability is important. And fashion has always been a leader of some movement through all the histories like that. You know, we've been anticipating something. We cannot give up now the idea that we should be more sustainable. Obviously, when we talk about European regulation, that's different, because I think the European regulation has been a lot influenced by different approach. Some people, they don't know very much about fashion. Some people that they think the fashion is something different for volumes, like fast fashion and something like that, that has a strong impact on our industry and on our planet. So still, again, as a creative fashion movement, we have to be quite strong on our point. What Pascal said is true. You go in a landfill and you find it full of football t-shirts, but I never found a Valentino lace dress there. So there is a big difference when we talk about landfills, when we talk about durability. That's what also Pascal said before. And this is valid for many other issues that in our legislation in Europe, we are not really clear about. It's not really clear. What are we? Are we representing this idea of creative fashion? So we have to follow that. We want to be a little bit of everything. Let's be clear about that. What do we think about fast fashion, as to be clear? Because if we think that fast fashion is good, we are wrong. I think that fast fashion must be more regulated than the rest of fashion. First, we have to define it. That is, and to make the difference between fast fashion and creative fashion. Second, fast fashion is important that we have democratic or affordable fashion, but must not be fast. Susie before said that we have to slow down, and the word fast is going exactly in the wrong direction, because fast means that we need to do something in 3 weeks, as very often we take creativity from other people to be fast in 3 weeks. and this creates another problem, protection, no, intellectual protection. Then means that we produce everything before, and if it doesn't work in our 10 stores, it's going to landfill immediately. 30% of the production is going to be destroyed without even trying to be sold. Like that, we also kill all African textile system because they are invaded by those products, and they don't have any interest to produce any more local products. So all these we have to face and to solve together with the fast fashion producer to make fast. And also we kill the space for the new designers, because the new generation buys very low price fashion, and the new designer, they don't have customers anymore. When I was young, I was selling to my generation. Now the new designer cannot sell to his own generation because he buys fast fashion. So I think if fast fashion should be more an economic fashion, slow, and giving space to the new designer to design the product in that field, in those groups that they produce some affordable fashion for new generation. So there we need to change. Going back to your question, of course, in all the I see all the board, all the governance of the brand changing a lot. A lot of people now, they are quite expert of sustainability. We have more parity. I mean, was a lot of just men before. Now it's much better. Not how it should be, but much better. So also the inclusion is working better. The approach to sustainability is working better. So I think that all the governance is going much further. And I think this is what fashion should be, showing a way to other industry. We should be leader, showing what will be the future for other industry. We have a responsibility. We have to take the responsibility of being or looking something before the others and showing the way. I think this should be fashion.
Super interesting too. And sustainability remains important. Not only competitiveness is, of course, but sustainability and governance boards, governance structures are getting competencies inside to manage this transition. And I go again back to you, Susie. I want to hear your opinion asking a question. What can fashion brands improve in their communication strategies regarding their sustainable practices, their responsibility, their approach to responsibility and sustainability? What can they improve in their communication practices? I ask it to somebody who knows about communication. And don't tell me that you are the wrong generation, because you are the right one.
I think it's so difficult for somebody trying to sell something
Microphone.
with the thoughtfulness. Sorry.
Yes.
With the thoughtfulness with which it was often made. I think it's completely wrong to suggest that nobody cares about how things are made. This is not true, particularly at the higher end, but I think it's become a very important part of what is done and what is presented. Of course, whether the buyer, whether the public, whether the person who buys these things really deeply cares, I'm not so sure. I don't say that in a cynical way, but we're all busy, and you like to think, as you do with food, that the people who are making it have chosen to do it correctly and right, and it will be good for you. I think that's very much the attitude of people today who are buying even very expensive things. Nobody really wants to go down to the nitty-gritty of everything. But that doesn't mean that it's not important. I've been looking since we've been being here in the École des Ponts at this fascinating picture there is of a woman when her hair is completely covered in, what can we say, trees, I suppose.
Yes.
And Christmas trees they look like. But the idea is to get the sense of nature coming out of the head. I certainly like that idea that people care about nature when they are buying things. But there again, I think it is complex. It's like the story about saying how disgusting it is that people who've just taken something out of the, they've been doing some sort of game or whatever, and then they throw their things they've been wearing in the washing machine and waste all that because you don't need to put them in the washing machine. You can just do it, wash it at home. You know, these things are complicated because they're connected to real people who are very busy, who don't want to have time when they're washing things, even though in the spirit of what they do, they want to do it. And I think that's the problem now. People want to live a better life and to help the world be a better place. But it's a big but. Who's going to do it for them? How much should we, it's not them, it's how much should we, us, put into what we do? How much should we think? If we go to buy something, do we look inside and find out how we can keep it clean? Can we wash it? I mean, all these details. We're too busy for that. But we want somebody to go through and bring the answer for us, so that we can feel, not in a showing off way, that we can really feel that we are buying things in a better way, in a better place, and keeping them clean equally. But it's a big ask.
It's a big ask. I understand that it's a big ask also to the industry to help us to do it. And again, this industry has some features of a leader in sustainability, also for other sectors. But we have to be realistic and keep an eye on what people really need to follow on this. And now I want the voice of science again and academia. How can a ReTech Center contribute to governance models that are consistent with this drive to sustainability in the fashion industry? What's the contribution of ReTech to that? What do you do?
Thank you, Simone. So one example of the work that we do is, in fact, the project that, Simone, you are involved yourself as a senior fellow at ReTech Center, and also as the Dean of MFI, with Carlo as well himself will be involved, and Pascal, hopefully. So the work is that we have put forward a cluster competitiveness analysis of the fashion industry that we are delivering with the Microeconomics of Competitiveness Network of Harvard Business School. So that's one example in which we highlight the role of responsible governance. Exactly, Susie, I echo what you also just explained. Where is that line of responsibility? Industry, consumers, also the whole procurement, the value chain, right? So the question of responsibility must be asked and then must be answered. So the good news is technology as a tool can help us do that with data analytics, with simulations, with AI. Now we can churn tons of data to have a better understanding of what is happening. That's the good news. But the better news is that in terms of awareness, collective awareness that we have, cross generations, according to research and science, since you asked, based on research, increasingly, statistically speaking, the level of awareness of consumers have been growing over time and exponentially over the past 10 years. So more and more people do know and more they do care, and then they can find those products that reflect those values of responsibility better. In other words, we have more and more consumers who would choose the products that they're going to buy based on the transparency on the supply and value chain and how was this made, right? Respecting the stakeholders' value. So in terms of governance, what we do is that we drive these type of initiatives. I think, Simone, you tell me, you know best. When was the last time that you had under the same roof, with Paola also joining us, you had major players of the industry, two main poles of the industry, academia, media, and the public sector. So this is it.
Absolutely.
So right here, you see on this panel, Carlo and Pascal, who represent Milano and Paris. And Simona, of course, is coming from the UN himself, but Paola Deda is also a member of our Fashion 5.0 governance, board of governance. So this is what we do, an exemplar, as like putting things concretely into action. This is what we do. We create these type of conversations and we act upon it. So I think technology can be some good help.
And you think we'll see more of these conversations on this stage?
Oh yes, sir. This is
More
only-
of these
yes,
conversations,
sir,
because
yes,
that's the
of course.
the
We'll have
aim.
a short announcement at the end.
Okay. I have the last problem I would like to discuss with you. I now ask you to be, I don't say telegraphic, but to stick to 2 minutes each in your replies, because we are going towards the end and we want to remain within the time frame we gave us, and also to allow Paola Deda to draw her conclusions. And this problem is about artificial intelligence-driven design, how it is transforming the industry, how digital work models are evolving, and if we need, how can we need to ensure fairness and inclusivity in digital fashion. This is the issue. Is it possible to have that in digital fashion? Carlo, I come to you now. How can brands ensure ethical adoption of artificial intelligence? How can they mitigate algorithmic bias? How can they establish fair digital work practices? 2 minutes to you. I'll be a severe timekeeper.
Well, it's what we said before, no? At the end, fashion is aesthetic, but also ethic. And the ethic side is important. So first of all, we have to work in education. So people must be educated. This is the clue of everything. We must work in education, in the school, in the companies, everywhere. We have to give in our fashion councils. We have to work in education. We have to work with the people, with the new generation, to make them aware of what are the challenges of today. So I will put education at the center.
Education at the center.
For this matter.
Education at the center.
Education at the center. And then, of course, this education is then making happening what we wish. That is more presence in fashion of the ethical side that has to always be parallel to aesthetical, because there is no aesthetical without ethical. And this is something that we discover thanks to sustainability, inclusion, diversity, and we discover more and more during those last years. So I would stay on education.
Wow, education. We are in a university, in a business school. This is great. Pascal, I have a different question from you, always around this. Is there one major shift in the fashion industry that the fashion industry must embrace in 2025? Is there one? What would you see? What would you mention? One major shift we need to embrace now.
No, there is a big transformation, but I would like maybe to emphasize a paradox to finish.
Yes.
Because you mentioned about digital fashion brings up a huge challenge, as we said, of transformation linked to sustainability, etc. But it has also these characteristics to do so that people just buy like digital push button. Yes. And buy in a very spontaneous way and instantaneous way. So this doesn't help for fashion. I'm not talking about creative fashion in general. It doesn't help for the volumes because it increases the volumes. And fashion has the real problem of the problem of sustainability is basically volumes. What we have, let's say, a production and consumption of 130 billion pieces a year. 30 billion for Europe. Creative fashion is maybe 1,000 less.
Yes.
And so digital fashion, there's this big risk of digital fashion continuing, of course, with the ultra discount, etc., to have this disease of increasing the volume, so degrading the situation that brands and many houses just try to improve. And on the other side, creative fashion, as you say, fashion can pave the way, and creative fashion can be not affordable for anybody, but can pave the way with craftsmanship, the link between craftsmanship and creativity. And of course, education is fundamental into that, and shows another way of modernity. So there is really this alternative, and creative fashion has to be as strong as possible in terms of ready-to-wear or any product or any kind of product, to show that there is this other way. And maybe I can finish on one word coming to my mind, following what what Susie said about slowness, creativity and craftsmanship, and the idea of slowness. Comes up to my mind a line I like of this French writer in 1 century ago that he wrote in the 30s, and his name is Monterland. You know him. And he said that considering speed and whatever has to do with speed, a slowness is appealed to become the only way to express a certain type of refinement. But this refinement can be accessible not only for people who buy our products, more globally, if we pave the way for the sensory perception, this notion, savoir-faire, craftsmanship, and creativity. So once again, beyond fashion, towards humanistic embodiment of, let's say, acting in society.
It's incredible because you got again to a ground of humanistic approach, to a philosophical thinking, and this is what we are all doing here in your business school, which is part of a scientific university. But we all go back to that, and I want to divert a bit from this. And Susie, we spoke about education because we spoke about the need to nurture our minds to face this challenge of sustainability. Again, given the differences we have today in the media means many things, but can media have a role in this, especially as regards this transition to sustainability, to responsible sustainability, to inclusion, to responsibility? Can media have a role in this, in educating people and people also in the industry?
I think the whole story is on 4 letters, C-A-R-E, care, that people should care. And whether you are in a school or whether you're teaching, what's more important when you're working, and the more you're doing kind of modern work, that's not a simple thing that you take a piece of fabric and make a shape out of it. But I think that the idea that you care what you're doing, you care whether you're making, say, a garment comfortable for the person who's going to use it. You care that the people who make things are well treated. You have to care now. You always did have to, but I think we've let things go. We've let things get into a situation where as long as it's done, doesn't really matter who suffered. And it's not just a who suffered it. It was perhaps a piece of land that suffered. So many things can suffer if we rush ahead to try and produce more clothes or whatever it is. So that's what I think, that the most important thing at this time in the world is to care.
Is to care. My generation in Italy was shaped by the thinking of a pacifist whose motto was, I care. I care. We are going back to that. I care. This must be the motto, and maybe media can help us to popularize that. I care. I care.
Simone, may I say something?
Yes, Carlo.
Susie, in 2010, we gave a prize to Susie, the first in our Sustainable Fashion Award. She was the first winning the Visionary Prize.
The Visionary, I
And
remember that.
and why that? Because in 2010, she was the first journalist to address seriously the fact that sustainability, she wrote a beautiful article about that, 2010, I think, the sustainability would have been the big challenge because we had to care more. And that would have been the real challenge for fashion for the future. And she was very visionary at that time. And that's why she gained that prize. And I want to remember that now that she was talking about caring.
That is very nice of you. And also in 2010, you wrote about us in Africa. So that
I'd
care.
like to say something here, though, which is
Please.
that as a journalist, you can only publish what you're allowed to publish in every sense of the word, that they've got the space for an article which isn't, encouraging some of these wonderful people we see and everybody knows and they advertise. It's quite difficult being a journalist, and more so now. And I was very fortunate to be so long at the International Herald Tribune, the general part of the New York Times, because they allowed me to write these things. So I don't think that I'm the only person who thought of doing it. I was pretty brave, I must say, when coming to see you. And I always remember some of the things crazy things we did. I don't know how we survived. But even so, you have to care as a journalist, and you have to care as when you make things. But caring is not really a very popular idea at the moment, but maybe we should make it more so.
I care is the motto that we adopt today for our work, for our studies, for everything we do. I care. This is the motto that we adopt today. Thank you, Susie. Paola Deda, you've been online waiting for us to wrap up. I don't give you more than 5 minutes, just it's even too much because we have to conclude, but we need you to wrap up. Tell us, what are your notes? What are your notes out of our conversation? Over to you, Paola Deda, online.
Thank you so much, Simona. Thank you, everybody. It was really interesting to follow. I have 7 points. I'm going through them very, very quickly. First, I will start with a generational issue, right? When you talk about how much of artisanal intelligence versus artificial intelligence, and how do we get the balance right, as Susie was asking, I was actually wondering whether the balance will be different depending who is speaking. Nothing against our generation, but I was wondering maybe if you get some of the students that are in front of you responding to the same questions, whether we would have got similar answers or maybe different. It's really the balance. And let's not forget, we all come from a generation that lived without any internet and then moved to the internet. Now we cannot live without it. So we all change as generations change, but also as technology helps us changing. Second point, measuring. Measuring came out and many times, measuring creativity, measuring circularity, measuring sustainability, measuring durability. Again, important question here is who is going to do this for the buyer? I think this is a crucial point that is connected also to the third point I have, which is the complexity of data. Maybe we would welcome DPPs. We will welcome, an enormous amount of data related to KPIs, traceability systems. The problem is, who's going to do this? It's not going to be the buyer. The buyer wants to care, wants to make the right choice, however, needs to have that information handy. At the point, again, with this sort of oxymoron, how do we simplify complexity, right, of data, of the whole sustainability issue? And here I connect to what Salman said. Well, technology is an enabler. So here comes the power of technology answering to all our questions. It has a transversal role, whether it's artificial intelligence, generative or not, or blockchain technology. It should not be seen as a danger, as a risk, but as an enabler to get there where we want in the right way. Two other important points: being lost in translation and definitions. I agree that this is also an important point. Very often when we talk about sustainability, durability, circularity, we don't all mean the same thing. At the same time, a word of caution from my end, just the fact that we mention this terminology means that someone is working in a better or worse way. We all have a different understanding of what democracy means, but we all know that it's important to have a concept of democracy and then get there one way or another. On this, I connect to my sixth point with the governance for sustainability. Well, first of all, I sensed a bit of geopolitical anxiety. We are all going through this lately. Nevertheless, I think we all believe in sustainability for the jobs we have, wherever we're coming from. What I like very much is this a need to make the fashion industry responsible, accountable, but also in a leading role. And anticipating trends has been historically the role of fashion. And we should not forget the power of aesthetics. I'm not so sure that aesthetics always comes with ethics. We are not there yet, definitely, but we can use aesthetics to promote ethics. And this is really, I think, an important point, because aesthetics speaks to everybody. Beauty is a concept, whether it's in architecture, art, or fashion, that helps the transition and progress always in whatever society. Last point, probably the elephant in the room. I'm really glad it came out at the last time, and is volumes. It's the quantity that we produce, and so if we want to be slower and really counteract fast fashion, it's a matter of looking also at the quantity that we produce, how we do this, different ways, but also I believe that technology here also has an important role. So I stop here. I don't know, you gave me 5 minutes. I think I took 5 minutes just to say, and a conclusion was extremely interesting to follow from here. I hope, Salman, this is going to be recorded so it can be put online for more to listen and to use, because it's extremely interesting. Could be even turned into a very interesting podcast. Speaking of media and the power of messages, certainly there is a lot to learn from today's event. So back to you, Simone, and thanks everybody. And again, apologies for not being online with my camera, but really I'm not in a position to do so, but I could listen in and hopefully contribute a bit with just with my voice. Thank you, and back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paola. Thank you, Paola. You stick to your time. You are incredible timekeeper. And the voice of Paola Deda from UN Economic Commission for Europe in Geneva. Before we wrap up, we have an announcement, Professor.
Not yet.
Not yet, sorry.
We get some questions from the audience also. I received some here.
I was cutting the questions because they put there a clock up there. And I see our time is finished. That's why I was going to the announcement, but you are the boss here. Right. So go for the questions.
So I am receiving some questions here. Also, if there are questions here, don't hesitate. I'm reading now a couple of questions for you, Simone. You also get, please, Hillary. So we take a couple of questions, Simone.
Over to you, straight to the point, your questions.
Simone, we take a couple of questions, but before answering, I also read a couple of questions that we received from online.
That's okay.
Please.
Usually in governance, communication, and technology. I am actually a professor in finance for fashion. And while working with students and building projects, they are really into sustainability socially, environmentally. But then we arrive at a point where the business is not profitable. And then I see them shifting. I say, what are we doing? And they say, okay, instead of producing in Italy, we're going to China. Instead of actually hiring and paying fair salary, we're going to take 3 or 5 interns. And I'm saying, so now you are losing all your sustainability values. And this is what is happening also with what you've said. With all of what you've said, how are we going to use technology and our knowledge and data to actually be sustainable in our sector while being profitable? Is it possible to keep growing in terms of number, in terms of what investors want, and still be sustainable? So that was my question. Is it possible to be profitable?
Very clear question. Do you want to read a couple of questions online?
Yes.
Because Susie needs to leave in 10 minutes. Sure.
Thank you for
straight to the question.
Thank you for a lovely talk. I had a question about coming up with digital certificate, for example, for like diamonds. For a certain industry, they're working on diamonds for digital certificate to see what they can do to actually certify. Okay, this was very sustainable in order of there was right amount of labor regulation, wage issue that went on this supply chain. And also in terms of like supply chain transparency, sometimes it's not transparent as it should be, but what could be done more further on in the current fashion and textile industry, because that's something that I haven't learned in St. Martin's or at USAP, for example. So, yes.
Thank you very much. I'm also reading a couple of questions that we received from online. So very good questions here. So the advantage is that you're here, so we are going to continue after we cut off the live session, and then we continue the conversation here. But for those who are online, also I'm reading for the panel. So the question was about the impact of Fashion 5.2 on the job market, which I think we addressed. What challenges do brands face in integration of AI-driven personalization? Overproduction and incorrect sizing. So how can AI help us with the more precise measurements as maybe an answer? The price points that sustainable products are not very accessible, and the price point of luxury products and brands who have some elements of sustainability who are not accessible. So what can be done? Consumerism is addressed, the push for consumerism, how we can address that. So if I may, I just quickly, because the question that you answered is very, very important, because that's also one of the topics of conversations that we had in our Fashion 5.0 Board of Governance with everyone that you see here, and Paula, who's online, and others. In fact, in order to respond to those type of questions about the business of fashion, the responsible business models and the responsible operational models, which are complex, are not easy to deal with. And that's what we found as a fantastic sort of niche, but also a challenge that needs to be addressed, which also links to the announcement that we want to have for this. So we will continue the conversation over the champagne and the wine that is here waiting for you. We will need to end the online session right after the quick announcement that we do, and then we have this conversation here, and then for the online ones,
do we want to give to Pascal the possibility to reply and Carlo to reply to some of the questions?
Please.
1 or 2 words.
Please.
Not taking one question after the other. I would like, we're going to talk after, we're going to answer to all of that. But concerning the question of, let's say, brands which give up their ecological mind, what you ask, this is the point. So to answer, I will take the contrary dynamic. Any brand which don't care about sustainability can undertake a way of getting more sustainable with a systematic approach concerning the collection of the fabrics on one side, concerning the production factors, concerning the company itself, and then knowing what's happening with the regulation and so on. What happens sometimes is that when you have a number of brands and young entrepreneurs who are absolutely environmentally focused and who are so much focused that everything in the brand is focused, that is linked to that purpose. And then after the case, it becomes more realistic and it loses that dimension. So sometimes, I mean, I think it's great because many young, for designers, or let's say fashion globally, entrepreneurs, even not creative fashion, want to go into that. Sometimes in a bit candid way. So that has to be taken care of through the anticipation of the business model. Any brand can be more sustainable, and there is a question of price point. There's many questions, certified fabrics or not, etc. Many things to do, but everything has to be anticipated because the fact of starting, I'm ecological, and going through trial and error can have a boomerang effect sometimes. So we can continue the conversation.
May I say one word very fast? If we think about sustainability, we have to think not about something going back, like we have to produce as was 100 years ago, but like something going further. So what will help in terms of make sustainability more affordable, better relation between price, product, and everything is research. We have to be technology can help, is the answer to sustainability for the future is technology. We have to invent something better to be more sustainable. This is what we have to do. We have to invest on researching some new ideas, products, or ways of producing that will make our industry more sustainable for the future. Now it's very costly, but will be less costly if we invest on it.
And business models linked to that.
And on affordable fashion, I want a yes or no from you. Is a possible solution the role of emerging young small designers, the one to make fashion affordable because of the prices and so on? What do you think, yes or no?
Yes, new designer, they have a mind very much oriented to sustainability. They are native sustainable, but they have to have more chance for technology. Otherwise, they stick on the old way to be sustainable. Also, regulation doesn't allow them to be very sustainable, because when you talk about upcycling, recycling, the actual regulation doesn't make those products sellable everywhere in the world for the rules related to upcycling and recycling that are, I think, wrong interpreted today.
And we have to also to take care of the sense of what is quality, what is creativity, and what it does represent. No, the scale of prices is kind of changing in the spirit, in the mind of people, because when you can buy a dress at 3 or 5 euros, then you can ask yourself, just why would I buy then even a dress at 50 or 55 or 60? So that is the point, and it raises many problems, and not so much to creative fashion by itself, which is a little bit out of that scope, out of that question mark, but to the global scaling system. So we have to communicate and to educate, and people have to understand, and it has constantly to be reminded, but not to give lessons to people, but by exchanging with young people, with teenagers on that thing. And then we find again the fact of the necessity to understand what is behind, what it means to care. And we should not abandon. We should not say, oh, it's too difficult. Let's do things. We should go ahead and express that convictions. And the young entrepreneurs and designers who work on that are much motivated into that, but they have to be also very competent in using technologies, new business models, and because that precisely the question of the dialectics between the instantaneous, like Fabio's product, or nothing of having quality as something you care. The fact that secondhand and vintage is so successful is something which go in the right sense, and the fact also that teenagers and young people who are not in fashion, still many of them know brands, know what it means, know the imaginaries, can be very not only helpful, but can go in the right way in this direction for this, let's say, global awareness.
Susie, a final word from you on this.
Youth is everything. We believe in youth, and we're not wrong, because what's going to happen now is going to come from this generation and the next generation. And when we're all dead and gone, there'll be somebody else, a young person, coming up with a brilliant and original idea. And I'm looking forward to it all.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Susie. Thank you. It's beautiful. Saman, we wrap up with an announcement. Let's go for it, because we need to wrap up.
Sir. So, I have Carlo here as the president of Camera Nazionale della Moda Italiana, and Simone as the dean of MFI. And
MFI is the Milano Fashion Institute.
Milano Fashion Institute.
Yes.
So the announcement is the joint degree programs and certifications, of course, that we are launching exactly to the point that Susie also mentioned right now, and it came across several times, regarding upskilling, reskilling, the gap of skills, the importance of understanding and at the executive level, the understanding of decision-making and governance. So exactly to answer those type of questions, and also as rightfully you asked, there's a problem. Sustainability, yes. Circular economy, fantastic. What about the financial sustainability of this? What about, what do we tell to investors? So all those questions, we worked on them. We gathered a lot of information. We did a lot of research. And long story short, we are launching joint degree programs with Milano Fashion Institute at ReTech Center, with, of course, CNMI and École des Ponts Business School and École Nationale des Ponts et Chaussées endorsing, supporting, and providing us with the required means. And you will hear very soon about these programs. I guess if you're
The
registered.
first one is an executive MBA that we will launch very soon. We will in due time launch also a DBA. Go to the ReTech website, come to the Milano Fashion Institute website to get information. I thank our panelists. I thank changemakers.
Thank you.
You modified your schedule to be with us. I know it's very heavy. You've been on the road for weeks. And that's incredible. Thank you. I thank Pascal. Thank you, Susie. Thank you. I thank Pascal Moran, notwithstanding all what you have to do. I called you on the phone and you replied. And not only you replied, but you also came here. Thank you, Pascal. Carlo is organizing probably the most important meeting of the year for the industry in Italy. Tomorrow, he came. Carlo, Madonna Santa, thank you. Thank you. Saman, thank you for hosting us. And guys, you online, you will have the registrations, and many more people are asking that. You are hundreds of people. Your prize, your reward is this registration to watch it again. And the reward for the few people who are here is that along with your replies, you will get champagne. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Paola, you are our angel in Geneva.
Thank you so much. Enjoy your champagne.
But Paola, you don't have champagne.
Bye-bye. I'll leave you now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So to you, and Susie, to you.